Hello, everyone, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, number 438, recorded live and in Technicolor on July 31st, 2019.
It's funny you say Technicolor since we both decided it was Black Shirt Day.
Yep. Black shirt day. And I try real hard not to wear black shirts because my chair is black and I feel like I kind of sink in, but I'll be darned if I don't just have a bunch of black and dark blue shirts. But you may ask why I'm wearing this fancy black shirt. It's because the folks at SysKit, who have been offended by my sign here for several years now, sent me a big box of stuff. And one of them was the shirt, so I'm breaking that out this week. And then I've got a new sign to replace that one, so maybe I'll break that out next week. Got a coffee mug.
A coffee mug? I want a coffee mug.
Yeah, they don't like you as much as they like me, so.
I bet that if I told them I want a coffee mug, they would send me a coffee mug.
Let's not test that. I think we'll just assume that that they don't like you and wouldn't send it.
Fair enough.
So our long national nightmare is nearly over.
There's no chance, right? Because we all know that it's going to be one of two things. Either you and I are going to spend 8 hours on a video call to hang the sign, or it is going to be crooked as you know what. I almost feel like it needs to be crooked. Is
it part of the thing now? Is it?
All right, what if you do this? So, the kids that are terrible at art, sometimes they do like expressionist art, right? Where they just kind of throw stuff out there. So what if we purposely hang the sign like really crooked so no one can judge and be like, you didn't, right? If you try and fail, you get mocked. If you're like, I literally tried to make it crooked, then you can't go wrong.
Yep. And just embrace it. Yeah. I'm with you. So to that end, some friends of mine there's a retro arcade in town. I think they're called barcades, but it's got arcade games from the 80s. And one of my friends was having a party, like, we're having this dress like a nerd night. You and Jill should come down. And so I'm like, so what I'm hearing is that I just dress like I normally dress. Like, I'll just show up. And she's like, I was going to make a joke about that. I'm like, that's the thing. If you embrace it, you can't be made fun of for it. So if I embrace, hanging the sign crooked, make it a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad Iowa finally got one of those. We had one of those about 12 years ago, so I'm glad you guys are, you're only 12 years behind.
We had them in the 80s, so we beat you guys by like 25 years. So take that.
Did you really have them in the 80s, or did you have them in the 90s?
We had them when I was a little kid. I remember like coming out of Tron, the movie, at the theater, and then going to an arcade and going, this is a little... Yep. Devin in the chat room is mentioning that it's funny that we waited to hang the new sign. We actually looked at it before the show. It came rolled up, and I've got it sitting on the floor with a couple of books. I finally found a good use for your search book. This is the happiest I've been with that search book in 10 years. But I've got it sitting out so it flattens out, so I have a fighting chance of hanging it up. So I wanted to hang it up, Devin. Honest, I did.
It'll be a big unveiling.
And of course, it's black, so it'll just blend in with my shirt and my chair. And
yeah, well, the people with really good eyes can see your microphone also is slightly in the frame, but you can't really tell except when the SysKit logo gets cut off in a rounded way. So it's like an eye test. If you guys can't see his microphone through his shirt, you don't distinguish between blacks very well.
Yeah, that's you folks that only listen to the audio version of this are really missing out. You just. So hopefully we'll get the sign fixed in the next week or so, and it'll be ready for next week's podcast.
All right. Well, so speaking of retiring things, so the wonderful sign is being retired. I hear just today that Skype for Business is about to be retired, but maybe not all of Skype for Business. I don't know.
I saw that headline yesterday that Microsoft announced they're going to retire Skype for Business Online in 2021. So that's the Office 365 version of Skype for Business. I am torn on that. Like, I don't know how I feel because I don't like Skype for Business, but I don't like Teams even more. And I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah. Well, I have. You're the only one I talk to on Skype for Business anymore. I completely moved all my other conversations to Teams. I just didn't want to do that to you because I knew it would stress you out. And I've gotten better, right? It is not good by any means, right? The whole to have a conversation while you're on a call, multitasking, that's not a strong suit.
Can't be done. Yeah, impossible. Yeah.
Well, as long as you do it all from the same tenant, you can do it.
Yes.
Right, but yeah, you can't switch. I mean, you're like me. You probably have 7 different tenants you're part of.
Yep.
So the good news is I ignore all the other tenants that I'm part of. I only really hang out in the PowerApps 911 tenant. So.
Yeah, for me, where it really comes up is I've got a bunch of customers that have embraced Teams.
Yep.
So when they have a meeting, they send me a link to their Teams tenant. And depending on whether I've got an account there because of security things they can't share, so then I'm in a call with them, and then Mark or Julie or Derek or somebody sends me a text in our tenant. If I click it, it hangs up the call. If I'm logged into a different tenant.
Yeah, if you're in a different tenant. Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess that's one of the big differences is the clients that I talk to, or like when I do client calls, I always log in with my PowerApps 911 tenant into their call, whether I hosted it or they hosted it.
Yeah.
But then the screen sharing crap. I mean, that is just a terrible way they set that up.
There's no other way to describe it than crap. Yeah, for me, I really so for me, the switching users, though, I found ways to mitigate that, like the whole making sure I log in as my tenant. And for me, for a lot of them, I've got some tenants where I can't do that, and I just ignore them. I mean, like Mark Rackley, when he set up the Collab Summit thing, he set up a Teams thing for that, but it made me switch users, so I just didn't participate. It was just, I mean, it sucks because I would have liked to have, but that was part of that. The other thing I really hate is the fact that you can't have multiple instances. Like, that really kills me.
Yeah, all your complaints are valid, but I've accepted it. I've just moved on. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to suffer through the experience that this provides because at this point, I feel like we have to.
Yeah, well, and I have too, but it just means we're less productive than we were a year ago. Like I would have participated in the Collab Summit discussions and given people rides from the airport and all that kind of stuff if it hadn't been in Teams, if it had been in some place I could use it more easily. So, but I mean, yeah, you're right. It's where things are going. There's some front end reasons that it's going that way. There's some back end reasons it's going that way. I've moved to acceptance, but it's not great.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. So just so we're clear, they're retiring Skype for Business Online. They're not retiring any of the Skype on-prem stuff, right? None of that's going away. It's just the online pieces. But one of the things I've also noticed with Skype Online is it doesn't always work, right? They have slowly broken pieces of it to kind of nudge me to Teams. The same way they break my computer to force me to apply Windows patches.
To reboot, yep.
They keep doing the same thing. Like, Skype will just be like, oh, this Skype meeting just won't work. It won't work. We're having hardware issues. I'm like, nah, hang up the Skype meeting. Let's have a Teams meeting. Same hardware, same computers. It all works great.
Magic.
That is not a coincidence.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're moving to Teams, and I think that they're giving us nearly a year heads up on that. So for people who have on Office 365 and are like me and curmudgeons and don't like Teams, this is we know where the end is, and yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty nice that they're giving us a year plus, because one of the things that one of them reminded me is that any feature in Office 365 or the online suite as a whole, any feature that has a direct replacement, aka Skype can be replaced by Teams, they only technically have to give us 30 days notice. Could you imagine the world right now, though, if they're like, hey, in 30 days, Skype for Business Online is going away? Could you imagine the uproar? So they're not going to do that, but apparently they hold that capability.
Huh. So I was just thinking, I have one instance where that would be a problem, and that would really be a problem. That's crazy.
Well, in this show, right, as far as we know, last time we tried to use XSplit with Teams, it didn't work. That's the reason you and I still talk on Skype.
Yeah.
So, yeah, our podcast is now canceled because Microsoft canceled Skype for Business for 30 days now.
But we're just doing screen grabbing now, so we could screen grab Teams, couldn't we?
Probably. Yeah, we should. I guess we probably need to start trying and figuring it out.
Yeah, but it's coming. It's on its way. So you've been warned. And Microsoft's been, they're trying to convince us that Teams doesn't suck, and they have varying degrees of success. You threw a thing in the chat here about another one of their campaigns to convince us Teams is great. Yeah.
Apparently they've reached 13 million daily active users and 19 million weekly active users. Those are big numbers, and they don't mention it anywhere in the article, but there's just a pretty little, in the article, there's a pretty little graph there happens to also be another product on that graph.
I have no idea what you're referring to.
Yeah, it's not Slack by any means, and it doesn't show where they just clearly finally surpassed Slack in a very violent fashion. So
I use both, and obviously we're using Slack for the chat room right now. I have strong feelings on which one I like better than the other.
I like Teams better. I still hate Slack. Hate it.
Yeah. Well, you hated it before.
I realize our opinions differ here, right? But I will just say it out loud that all the complaining about Teams is still way better than Slack for me.
Yeah. Oh, and Mark in the chat room mentions that it's easy to get that kind of adoption when it's part of something that people are already using, and you're shutting off the thing that they've got a lot of tailwinds on that rollout.
They do, right? But as a stockholder, which they also hit an all-time high on that this last few days, I will just say that I'm very, very happy with the way they're using their tailwinds. So go.
Yeah, and honestly, it's good. I mean, I don't wish ill for Teams. I think the more people that use Teams, the more attention some of these flaws will get, and so hopefully it will result in them being fixed sooner.
Well, and it was interesting. So this week, Monday morning, I had a call with a person I've been engaged with, you've been engaged with in different capacities over the last 10 years for different, basically SharePoint-based projects. And talking to them, they're like, all right, we're finally ready to start moving to Office 3, or, understanding the move to Office 365.
Right, yep.
Which I really begged them to do last year, but they didn't. It's okay.
It's a process.
And so it was really interesting. Like, they came into the conversation, they were like, all right, we just need to have a SharePoint conversation, right? They want to talk about SharePoint 2016 on-prem to SharePoint Online, because that's what the move to Office 365 is. Yeah. And so I had to kind of stop them and all right, no, the first thing we got to talk about is, Azure AD, and then you probably should be looking at Exchange early and often, right? That's really
before SharePoint, certainly.
Yeah, right. Step 1, step 2. Then we need to talk about SharePoint. But really, as part of talking about SharePoint, we need to talk about Teams, because really I want you to go into this with a Teams-centric model, not a SharePoint-centric model.
Yep.
And then they're like, well, but OneDrive, OneDrive's a SharePoint. Don't think about that as a separate thing. But we started to have, right, the conversation got really complex really fast, because they just thought, we were just going to turn off some SharePoint servers and we were in the cloud.
Yeah.
So I think this reinforces this idea that we've been saying it forever. I haven't been doing it forever, but I'm saying it forever, is that Teams is going to be the center of the universe. You've got to embrace.
Yeah, I have had similar conversations with a customer recently, and they're moving from file shares to SharePoint. But it was a similar deal, I'm like, all right, I'm the SharePoint guy. Do you have identity in place? Good. Do you have Exchange in place? Good. And then they were, again, like, no, we're going to talk about SharePoint. And it's like, nope. I mean, we're kind of going to talk about SharePoint, but we're going to talk about teams and groups, and we're going to talk about architecture and hub sites. And a few of the people on the IT team have some experience with on-prem SharePoint. And so they're at that part of the Dunning-Kruger thing where they think they know it, but they don't know what they don't know, because they knew SharePoint on-prem pretty well. And so I've got a call after lunch with just their IT folks, just me, some IT folks, and a browser pointed to Office 365. And we're just going to go through, and this is what a hub site is, because you've never seen one on-prem before. And this is what a group is, because you've never seen one on-prem before. And so unfortunately, it's a much more complicated discussion than customers are expecting when they sit down with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And this same one, I think they have a file server today that has 20 terabytes.
Sure.
Right. That's a big number, right?
That's yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. So and they're like, well, can we just go dump that all into OneDrive? I'm like. And so, so then one of the things we had to talk a little bit about was this whole idea around, I think we talked about this last week a little bit too, right? Is that, yes, in theory, Microsoft has published, they could dump all of that into one document library.
Sure, yeah.
It'd be great, as long as you don't need to manage it, edit it, touch it, or ever even look at it.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to explain kind of some of the downfalls of that, right? But with no Office 365 context at all. it's really hard to explain things like, well, now imagine that, everyone in your company wants to access that, and they all find the sync client, and they're all trying to sync a 20 terabyte thing, right? So there's a big hit for that, but then now you got people onesie twosies changing those 20. It's never going to work. You can't do it, is basically what I said. But that's contrary to the magic of you just dump everything in the cloud. So,
yeah, the files on demand would help with a lot of that. And then depending on which OneDrive you're talking about, then there's the whole, if it's a personal OneDrive, because that's the 1 terabyte of free space. Because I've got a couple of customers who've got, tens of terabytes of content that we're planning on migrating up. And I had to sit them down with the calculator and say, okay, you get this much storage with the number of licenses that you have, but everything past that costs you every month to keep. So how much of it do you want to copy up? Because it's going to cost you every month to keep this content. So then somebody's like, well, we can put it in OneDrive, personal OneDrives, because we get a terabyte of that, like, yes. But then when Jimmy in accounting leaves 30 days later, those files are gone. So just trying to work through all of the, yes, it's a process.
Yeah. And one of the things I don't like, I could say I don't like, right, is, back in our SharePoint on-prem days when we'd have conversations like this, man, I could give you answers and I felt like they were authoritative, right? This is how we do this. There's no argument. Shut up. Boom. When we have these conversations now, right? Well, I mean, this is my opinion of how we should do this. Something might change. I felt
strong about it last week, but
right, and it's such a departure from, by God, you're going to build your SharePoint on-prem farm this way. You're going to put the data in here like this. Shut up.
Yep. Yeah, I feel the same way, because when you and I would talk to customers, we had that whole architecture speech. It was well rehearsed. It's like you just pull the string and just let autopilot go, and it was just nothing but great technical goodness from start to finish. And now it's
What? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I think I saw yesterday that hub sites can now do this thing. So I think we might change your design. And I feel terrible, right? I'm like, I feel like a phony. And I mean, I guess I am. But at the same time, there is just no definitive right answer. And if it is definitively right today, ain't no way in hell it's right tomorrow or in 30 days. Yeah.
One of them, in an article that I put in the notes, Greg Zelfond wrote an article about how many document libraries should I have in a SharePoint site. And that's got some interesting things. It's probably not a whole lot of Office 365 specific stuff until you get to the Flow and the Teams bit at the end, but just how Flow and Teams interact with document libraries and where those barriers are. But that's just another thing to consider when you're figuring out your SharePoint Online architecture. How many document libraries? We don't want folders. We don't want lots of subsites. Our different units of scale are going away, and so all that works into something else, and just another piece to consider.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and he usually has really good stuff. So I haven't read that article yet, but I look forward to taking a look, because those are the things that people have got to start wrapping their heads around. And and then right, if you go the group-centric model, or the team-centric model, so you let the teams create the group and the SharePoint site, right? Then you get that default document library, which is great because it just shows up, but then there's kind of like you can't do all the adjustments to it. What back to you talked about before, it's got to be kind of that least common issue. And so then do you bring in more document libraries so you can have full control ones?
That's what we do, yeah.
Additional site collections? Do you do both?
Yep, so Mark has been a proponent of that, and I pushed back against it for a while, basically on inertia, because that's something that you and I said, just, keep everything in shared documents if you can. His philosophy is every time you create a SharePoint site, you create a document library to put documents in, not the shared documents one, because it is the default place for Teams and all these other things, and they're going to do stuff to it. And just like you said, if you do stuff to it, then it might screw that up. So it's better to have one that you have full control over. And that's taken some time to communicate to customers and just for me to wrap my head around and come to terms with. And
so when you create a new SharePoint site collection today, are you going to Teams and creating a team and letting it push everything down? Are you going to groups and creating a group, letting it push things down, and then adding teams? Are you going to SharePoint and just creating it? I mean, I know the answer is it depends, but what's your default answer?
My default position now, unless the customer's workflow is different, is I create them in SharePoint and then use a site design to add the additional document libraries and content types and things like that.
And so if you create it in SharePoint, then if you want Teams, you have to create a Teams channel.
You have to teamify it later, yeah.
And if you want a Office 365 group, or does SharePoint just do groups automatically now?
SharePoint creates the group, does not create the Teams channel, and then if you're you can create a Teams channel and connect it to a group that you own. Yeah.
Okay. But if you go Teams, then it'll do everything you are doing plus the team.
Yes.
Okay. That's what.
Yeah, that's a completely valid option. But for me as a SharePoint guy, I'm just used to doing things in SharePoint, and there's a lot of inertia there. But yeah, the Teams way does all the things. And then you've got the PowerShell options if you do it with the SPO PowerShell or the PNP PowerShell or the Teams PowerShell. Yeah.
Yeah, well, good. I mean, I feel good that I at least knew the options. Right? They haven't changed since I last looked them up, 3 days ago. So.
Yep. And site designs, again, that's one thing that I haven't seen a lot on, but we use those a lot. They've really been helpful.
Yeah, I haven't done those. I've done the PNP, the template. So build a template with PNP, suck the template in, and then provision or push that template over new SharePoint sites. I've done a bit with that, but I've not done the site design stuff at all.
It's pretty easy and powerful. There's a couple of bugs that we found with it. For one customer, we're doing some crazy customization, and every time we reapply a site design, it breaks something else. But I think we're getting that fixed. But yeah, site design. If you haven't played with site designs at all, if you're a listener, check it out. It looks scary. There's a lot of JSON and PowerShell. It looks very overwhelming. It's not that bad. I've got a couple of blog posts I keep meaning to post on it that I just haven't. But it's not that bad.
Very good, man. Look at us, like 24 minutes into the show, and we've covered a bunch of SharePoint stuff.
It's all been good so far, and I want to cover another one just because. Well, so let's follow this up. So I'm going to skip a topic. So one of an article that I saw here a couple of days ago was 10 things you should do with your Office 365 demo or dev tenant. Now, we all know that the internet loves lists. And so this was, 10 things. I'll be honest, so it's a good article, and you should read it, and it's worth the 2 or 3 minutes that it would read. But I was a little disappointed that one of the 10 things that you should do with your Office 365 dev or demo tenant is to create your dev or demo tenant. That feels like that's just list padding. Like you should have left that off and made it 9 things, but. Anyway, something you and I have told people for years now is you need a test environment to diddle with this product and check the changes and all that. And so this is a good article that tells you how to do that, and then depending on what you're doing, things to add. It doesn't cover everything. There's some other things that I like. The PNP provisioning bit is pretty good. People should look at that. But it's a good place to start. Oh, I guess he does have it in there. Never mind. So I like it. Good stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, it's right. Most of me just wants to jump off topic and be like, yeah, I'm sick of top 10 lists, but I literally submitted a session for Ignite that is, let me show you, because it's the
market. Yep.
Yeah, one of the conferences I spoke at, they're like, hey, can you rewrite your title to be something more top 10-ish? I'm like, no.
There's just not enough clickbait in your title. Can you?
But yeah.
Yeah, and Mark Chrisman mentions that the number one thing, the number 2 step that you should do is create a profile in Chrome with your admin credentials for your new dev or demo. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I don't even know how many of those I'm up to now.
Oh, Jesus. Well, and I tell you, so with Chrome, I do all my stuff in Chrome. I'm bummed they changed the icons, and you can't have the ninja icon anymore. I'm a little disappointed. So I've been reusing profiles. So that I can keep the ninja icon. I will find one of the ninja icon and redo everything. But yeah, Chrome profiles, I couldn't do my job without them.
Yeah. Well, I was excited they changed the little icons actually, because I'd gotten I'm up to 32, so I had repetitive of so many of them. I needed a new set.
Yep.
What I would really like, though, why can't they just let me put the icon, right? I want to just put the company logo of each company that I'm doing, so I don't...
If you sync that with a Gmail account, it will pull the profile from there.
But I don't want to make a Gmail account for these.
No, but so yes, and that's completely valid. I have created a few Gmail accounts specifically because of the profiles. Number one, for the icon, because I'm with you, I like the icon. But number two, then it lets you sync all of the history and the shortcuts and all that. So I've got a couple of machines that I work on routinely, and if you create that Gmail thing and sync it, then...
No, that's a good point, because there's only, so my main machine has 32. My Surface laptop probably only has 5, right? The ones that I'm willing to work on when I'm on the road.
Yeah.
So those 5 would probably make complete sense. You're probably right, but I'm not going to tell you that.
No, I'd never say that, because that would just embolden me to have other opinions. So one of the things I've been working on, and I've got a series of blog posts that I have not done that kind of build on this, but I published a blog post here a few weeks ago on how to handle dates in PowerShell. And I had a customer call this morning about something else that just reminded me that dealing with dates in PowerShell is such a pain. And it's a pain because there's about 15 different ways to express the same date. And then if you add those crazy foreigners, and by that I mean anybody outside the US, then they do it even differently. And so, like, measuring with dates and all that's not tough, but as somebody who writes functions that get consumed, making sure that dates come in the way you expect them to and you can handle them is really tough. And so the blog post that I've got in there is one of the many ways to format dates. If you've got a DateTime object, there's a bunch of canned formats that you can use that make it look pretty, but they're kind of tough to get to, so the blog post explains an easy way to see what those are and pick them.
If it makes you feel any better, date and time is infinitely easier to work with in PowerShell than PowerApps. So I don't know if that helps you at all, but because I've done all the same PowerShell date fighting that you've done. Well, not all, but I mean, I understand the challenges there. It turns out that PowerApps found some new ways to really screw with us.
Yep. So the thing that I was doing this morning, I had a process that I was showing to a customer that I'd written that took a bunch of things and transformed them into some other things, modernized a bunch of news, I guess. I don't have to be coy about it, but took some old classic news articles in SharePoint Online and modernized them to modern news. And this company's been in Office 365 for several years, so they have legitimately 2 or 3 years worth of news articles. And they each cite the number of news articles numbers in the hundreds. And so the process I've got now, I did a test this morning. I did 250 news articles, 290 news articles, I forget. It took about 2 hours. So not horrible. I mean, I ran a command and it churned through. And so I'm showing them all this, and I'm showing how, and I'm really proud of myself. I put a lot of love into this, got over a lot of hurdles. And one of the people on the call said, well, this is great, but we probably don't need all of the articles. Can you put a parameter on your PowerShell so you could put a date that says only articles since this day? Knowing how all the stuff in the background works, absolutely. I can absolutely see where that code fits. It's a great idea. It would cut things down. But the first thing is, I'm like, yes, absolutely. How am I going to normalize that input? Like, how am I going to handle the input that the user is going to give me to pull the date that they mean out of that? Because everybody's going to look at it different. Everybody, 01/01/01 dash January 1st. I mean, all those different ways.
Yeah. No, and that's yeah. And one of the big challenges in the Power App space is we have to fight with UTC.
Yeah.
But only certain data sources, right? So the smart data sources help us by doing UTC, and the dumb data sources don't. And for a lot of people, right, especially like those inexperienced people, I'm really helping. I'm like, screw it. Stop putting the date in a date field. Put it in a text field. So you just manage the whole thing, because you're just not smart enough. I'm sorry, but you're just not smart enough to handle date and time and UTC conversions and all that.
Yep. So a couple of the blog posts that I haven't finished yet are, and I wrote that blog post because I'm going to reference it in future blog posts, but I've got a bunch of pictures that I've taken, digital pictures, from different sources, and they don't sort correctly because some of them have EXIF data that says when it was taken, some don't, some the file name is when it was taken, some isn't, some is the year dash the month, some is year, month, all. So basically what I've written is some PowerShell functions that will go through, pull those different dates out of image files and then rename them so they sort correctly.
Yep.
Part of it was getting the dates in a normal fashion with this. Part of it was figuring out how to extract EXIF data from files, if there is any, and if there's not, then what do you use for the secondary date? Time zones also an issue. If I take pictures in Hawaii, how do they sort with things? Fortunately, that one's not a huge deal because I'm not normally mixing pictures that were taken at the same time in different time zones. Yeah. Daylight saving time, all that. But that's kind of what I'm going to, but I wanted to have that date one out so I could reference it later. But boy, that's been tough.
Yeah, well, yeah, and like time zones is a whole nother, right? So the UTC conversion is confusing, but time zones is an interesting conversation that we have to have with customers as well. They're like, I'm like, so when we upload this thing, what do you really want this to be timestamped with? They're like, well, the time. I'm like, yeah, but you guys are across multiple time zones, and so if we upload this from the Pacific time zone and we timestamp it with 8 p.m. Pacific. When I look at this on the East Coast, do you want to see that'd be 11 p.m. Eastern? I meant to go the other direction.
It took a really long time for you to do that math, but I enjoyed it.
So do you want to go? Do you want to see 11 p.m. Eastern because that is the exact moment in time it really happened, or do you want to see 8 p.m. local time because that's really if you were going to go review logs or tapes? And you're looking through their logs, you need to know the time it happened there, not the time it was here. And people get real confused real fast. I'm like, this whole time zone thing is not as clear cut as I just want the local time. You usually don't. You usually want the local time that it happened and no time zone accounting whatsoever.
Yeah, so. Or UTC and then an offset. Save everything as UTC. But then everybody's got to save everything as UTC. And
no one understands. Right? Us Americans don't understand what UTC means.
No. And I always love it when people get into these problems and just discover the depths of these problems. They're like, time zones are dumb. We should just get rid of time zones. Well, it would absolutely fix this particular problem. Yes. But now think of all the millions of other problems that it would cause if we didn't have time zones.
Yeah.
It's, yes.
And so last thing on the date and times, I have a video version of what you did, your blog post. So I posted a link in the chat room there.
Oh, perfect.
It's just one of those things I'd covered at one point because I got tired of the date question. So I just kind of did get date and all the different ways you can do it. So it's probably not as deep as yours, but it was that primer content on get date and time and all the ways to kind of manipulate that stuff.
Well, for mine, it is only, so the DateTime object has a property that lets you extract particular formats of dates. So there's always the dash format, dash U format, and all those other things. It doesn't cover that. But there is a get date time formats method that has a bunch of pre-canned ones in it. But the problem is when you run that method, it shows you all of the formats, but it doesn't tell you what the index number is, and there's like 120 of them. So if you find the one in the middle that's the one that you want, so you don't have to construct everything, there's no way to figure out what index number to put in so you can use it. So the piece of PowerShell that I wrote for the blog post lists all those formats and then the index number next to it, so you can just grab that index number and yeah.
Gotcha. Very cool.
So yours is probably more helpful. So we got a couple of minutes left. So you've got a couple of things to talk about. I wanted to, I'll save F for the end. Do you want to talk about G? Let's talk about that one. I think everybody doesn't want to talk about this, but yet knows they have to talk about this.
Yeah, so last Friday out on the PowerApps and Flow blog, they announced that there will be some licensing changes.
Yay, because it had been like a month since they changed license, so yeah.
I mean, I think it might have even been 4 months. I mean, they really wanted to space these announcements out.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so what they're trying to do, the current licensing model is, basically it's very confusing, right? There's what I call P0, which is the Office 365 free license.
Yes.
There's a P1, which allows you to do premium connectors. So if you want to connect to Salesforce or MailChimp or any of those type of services.
Yep.
And then there is P2, which gives you everything plus model-driven apps plus CDS, this big, giant, jumping off point.
Yep.
So what they've tried to do is they've tried to simplify this going forward Right, the Office, I guess the most important thing to say is if you're using the Office 365 license, nothing has changed. So the blog post, there's no reference, there's no changes there whatsoever. But instead of P1 and P2, what they're going to go forward with is a per app model. So you could say, hey, I want to just buy one license for these 10 people to run this app. And you get all the features of PowerApps, right? There's no more of this, you get some or another. You literally get everything. You get CDS, you get all the premium connectors, all of that. And so you can buy this individual, just one app, one license, go. Or if you're like, hey, I really love the Power Platform, I really love PowerApps, I want to build lots and lots and lots of apps, then you can buy a all-you-can-eat license for that user. And then they have, once again, all the features, all the functionality. So it's no longer kind of this concept of I get different features with different license tiers. It's either I have a license to run one app or I have a license to run all the apps. Ready, set, go.
Yeah. And then the other thing that is confusing is the license needed for the person who creates the app or the person that runs the app? Those questions are not explained easily enough for people reading them sometimes.
Yes, and so the long story short is that creating an app is no longer relevant. Is no longer part of the conversation at all. It is licensing is just to run apps.
Perfect.
So
excellent. And so this is one people get very angry about this, and this is one where Microsoft misstepped a little bit, but they're also a victim of their own success. So they used that whole model with PowerApps and Flow to get them out there. They gave the first taste was free, or mostly free, and then they were hoping everybody would love it and be happy to pay for it. So they underestimated how much everybody would love it because people really, really loved it and built a bunch of really mission-critical, great things around it. But then they overestimated how happy people would be to pay for that functionality, once that great functionality that they got. And I remember seeing, it was either Dan Holm or Chris McNulty was talking to somebody about it, and he's like, we got to pay for those servers somehow. Like, this functionality is not free for us to offer, and we got to charge somebody something. But so many people have taken it up, and so much that it's just charging them for it is, serious rage, as Mark put in the chat room.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because the pricing it seems very high. Mm-hmm. But if you go and look in the market for anything that even does half of what this does, this is the cheapest option by far.
Yeah.
Our friends at Salesforce have a version that does this type of stuff without all the connectors and all the stuff. It's really just a Salesforce thing. It costs more. There's several third parties that have standalone offerings like this, but they all cost more and they all suck. But so there's all these people that are out there doing this stuff, and they've kind of set the price story for the market, and the market's paying and doing very happy at that point. So the Microsoft pricing is actually under all of that. The problem, to your point, was the victim of their own success, is that everyone got used to having it all for free, and so now paying even 80% of what the rest of the market is paying is too much.
Yeah, they've anchored the price at zero. And the other thing is, at least for me and the customers that I talk to, they don't know about this Salesforce options or any other thing. So they have the anchor for them is free, as opposed to the anchor being, $80 a month or something that Salesforce charges. And people are just incensed, just infuriated. They feel like Microsoft's screwing them because they built all these important business processes around this free thing, and now Microsoft's charging them for it. And I feel bad for Microsoft.
Yeah, it's And most of my customer base is using the Office 365 license, which once again, they set the price point at free and is too cheap.
Yeah.
And so those people, the story doesn't change. So a lot of the people that are really angry right now were on the free plan anyway, and that free plan hasn't changed, so I don't know why they're angry.
Yeah.
It's really the ones that have invested in P1s for lots and lots of users. Those are the ones that are having the challenges, and Microsoft understands that. And that was honestly one of the reasons they kind of pushed forward with this now, was they wanted to get away from anyone else investing in P1 without understanding.
Yeah, this not going to be free. Yeah. Yeah, and I will also say that I'm working on a solution for a customer using an Azure function. And if you are confused or befuddled by Flow or PowerApps licensing, read through the licensing for Azure Functions. It is crazy cakes how that, because you get charged on 2 or 3 different things, and how long it runs and what it connects at and how much data rolls in and out, and it's just, man, because the customer, the Azure function is exactly the solution to what they need, and I knew that, but I had the luxury of not having to worry how much it cost, and so the customer very reasonably said, well, how much is this going to cost us? And I went through and read that document like, well, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, there's been a lot of those scenarios, right? And it's exactly what you want. I want to run some PowerShell. I want Flow to run some PowerShell. That's all I want.
Yeah.
And that just isn't that simple.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm doing with my Azure function. I'm writing Azure functions that use PowerShell. Another set of blog posts that I haven't published yet. And it's been frustrating and fun all at the same time. Yeah. So that was one. That topic is always going to change, but I wanted to mention it. So we're winding down. I've got one fun thing that I saw today that I wanted to mention. One of the things that I've done recently, I feel like the spam problem is mostly under control now.
Okay.
I don't get the egregious number of just flat out, blanket emails asking me to buy Cialis or, antivirus software or whatever. I think being on Office 365, they have such a huge view of that when spammers eject out a big bunch of spam, they can catch it so easy. I just don't get a lot of those. But I do get a lot of vendor spam where I walked past somebody's booth at a conference and they could see my badge and they scanned it, and now I'm always getting emails from them. So I've tried to get better about clicking unsubscribe to see, how that works. But we always, as a computer nerd, I see that, and then I get the email back from them that says, oh, sorry to see you go. It's going to take 4 to 6 weeks for that to go through. I'm like, 4 to 6 weeks? How does that, how am I not already out of the queue already? Like, if you have an automated process to send me this email, how does this automated process not also remove me from your automated process that sends me the email in the first place? Right. And so a guy on Twitter today posted a thread. He was a consultant for a company that did this, and he walks through, their process was 4 to 6 weeks, and he walks through why it takes 4 to 6 weeks to get somebody pulled out of their email list. And it is just amazing the amount of inefficiency. It is just crazy. So he talks about, I don't want to spoil all of it for you, but the unsubscribe link for the customer that he worked at, it ran a JavaScript job on the server that sent an email to somebody that says, unsubscribe this person, because it was written, 100 years ago. Well, for speed and efficiency, they compiled the Java that did this and have lost the source code. Good. And hard-coded in the source code was the email address of the person who took care of this. That person is no longer at the company. So now that mailbox goes to multiple people, so they get a physical, well, it's not a physical, but they get an email, and then there's some triage they have to do around that email about where it gets pulled out, if it's in this list or this other list. And then these individuals run SQL commands depending on which it is, and one of those SQL commands shoots off another email to another person in another time zone. I mean, it's just maddening.
Yeah, and there's no incentive for the customer or for the company to fix it, right? What do they care if you get spam for 4 or 6 more weeks?
Yeah, it's insane. So I've always wondered, how can it possibly take that long? Joe has the thing, so there'll be a link in the show notes about that.
It'd be a great thing to write a Microsoft Flow around, have it pull it straight out of MailChimp. It'd be done seconds later. But
yeah, certainly. I can think of a million ways to do it better. So that was a fun read. I'm glad I saw it this morning. Community stuff. I really don't have any community things going on coming up. I'm doing a bunch of traveling for myself and haven't got any of that. Do you got anything going on?
So October for the Power User Summit thing, but no, I don't have the details for any of that. Like you, I've applied to speak at Ignite, so we'll cross our fingers that happens. But
Yep. I have not actually applied yet. I'll do that today or tomorrow. But I did sign up to pay them, so that's
better man than me.
Yeah, I've got a sugar daddy now. So.
Yeah, we hired 2 more people, so we have 2 more people in the world that have a sugar daddy. Unfortunately, that's me.
So. You're a good sugar daddy. I've had worse. So yeah, well, hopefully I'll be at Ignite for sure. The whole Simpraxis crew is going to be there, and hopefully you'll be there as well. Hopefully we'll be podcasting from there. But I don't really have any other events coming up that I can think of.
Yeah, I honestly, we were talking about this pre-show, right? I feel like July, the whole world just kind of took July off.
Yeah.
Then Europe takes August off, so man, then it might be September before anything happens again.
Oh, I am speaking at the Thrive conference in Slovenia. I forgot about that one. So that is the week after Ignite. So if you're in Europe, you should sign up for the Thrive conference. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll be speaking on Azure AD and PowerShell or groups or something I forget. But great place, always great venues, beautiful country, beautiful conference. You should go there.
All right, well, let's button this thing up then.
All right, everybody. Thanks to the chat room. You guys have been great. I'm catching up on the production in the background, so I'm only like 3 behind now. So hopefully get caught up soon. But thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Toodles.